Hi there, welcome to this week's video on makeup brushes. I should really call it, what the heck is that one for? So many brushes out there, so many different ways to use them, and it can be awfully confusing and awfully expensive. Doesn't have to be, but there are some essentials, brush essentials, that I think need to be in every woman's little brush toolkit. So I figured I'd kind of walk you through the ones that I use, why I use them, and when you're out brush shopping, you'll know what to look for based on your needs. So let's launch right in. Foundation brush. You may have noticed this in a previous episode, I mentioned it. I've stopped using foundation brush, a foundation brush, and I've moved on to a sponge, only because I've noticed that my pores are getting bigger and I really like how the sponge pushes in the makeup. Sometimes the brush can gloss over the pores, even with a primer. So, you can use, there are brushes that are for foundations that you could actually switch over, use for your primer. And then if you want, take a sponge and you can use it as is. People say, well, do you wet the sponge? The only reason why you would want to wet it is if you're looking to dilute the foundation coverage. That's it. If you want your foundation coverage full on, just do it on a dry sponge. But just take it and press it in. That's the only time I'm not using a sponge these days. But there are foundation brushes out there. This would be a really good example of one. And it's by my friend Gentry Kelly. I'm going to give you an up-close look. What's nice is that companies are now starting to label their brushes, which, thank you, takes the guesswork out of everything, so it tells you what it's for. But the important thing to notice here, the bristles are super, super packed. They are firm. Many of them are made by different bristles, boar's hair, synthetic fiber, all of that. It really will affect the quality of the brush. Of course, your higher end brushes are going to have higher caliber bristles, but the key for a foundation brush is for it to be super, super firm if you choose to use a foundation brush, because you're really going to take it and you're pushing it in. You don't want this big kind of floppy, sweepy brush as you apply foundation. If you're like me, I've switched. I use this to apply my primer, and then I'm using the sponge now for the foundation. But short, semi-large, and firm is the key for a foundation brush. Moving on, I love this one by e.l.f. It's their concealer. And I use it for both concealing and for eyelid primer. So my eyelid primer is by Anastasia Beverly Hills. Great primer. Take a tiny, tiny bit, little goes a long way. And I put it on this brush, and we'll come in close so you can see the size. But I'm actually liking the smaller brushes these days for concealer, the smaller brush heads as opposed to the larger ones, because I am using less concealer and putting it in less area. Let me explain what I mean by that. So when I take my concealer now, I'm doing tap, 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 and one little tap here on the outer corner. And then I use the thin brush and I just push that concealer in. Because what happens now that we're mature is that we don't want a ton of concealer sinking into the crow's feet all out here when we smile. Less is more. Where do we need coverage? Really in here. This is where we have the discoloration. This is where we have the most to conceal and to balance. So press it in here, and then as it gets lighter, I start whisking that out. And then I will take that little bit that I put on the outer corner, and I really, really help to use that to lift in the end after I've applied my shadow. And we'll talk about shadow brushes in just a bit. But less is more when it comes to concealer. You will also need to set your concealer. For that, you're going to want a brush, and this is by e.l.f. You're going to want something about this size, kind of loose and floppy, and I take it in my same powder, the Laura Mercier Translucent Loose. That's what I use to set my foundation, and just a little bit goes a long way. But you would then just take it and just lightly press in. But this is a nice size because it fits this area really, really well. And then again, more in the corner, and then less on the outside, and that's how you set your concealer. A lot of women say, well, should I put concealer there and I'm sorry, should I put powder there and concealer? And it's, you need to look for the right formulations that are for mature skin and for wrinkling. And yes, a little bit of powder to set is important, because if concealer is too shiny, what it does is it makes any bulge, any bag under the eye, it's like the light hits that shine and boom, that's all you're seeing is that bag protrude. Really important to cut that shine, so a little bit of powder on top of the concealer is a must in my book. That's about the right size to make it happen. So your concealer brush should look like that and be pretty soft and flexible. Eyeshadows. All right, so I'm using my Tartelette palette today. I went with the middle row, these lovely kind of mauves and purple. So my main color for the lid is the second one right here. And what you'll want for that is your largest brush. Sometimes it's called a C brush. In Gentry's case, she named it Lid. Makes it easy, but let's do a close-up so you can see what to look for. So like I said, this one says Lid on it. And look at the size. This is going to be probably your biggest sized brush for your eye area. And it's got this curvature to it. Round, but firm. Okay, that's the secret to an eyelid brush. You don't want these to be super soft and flimsy. You want them to be firm. Why is that? Because you're trying to pack eyeshadow onto the lid. And if the brush is too loose, as you're applying, powder is flying everywhere. And not only is it flying everywhere, it's flying below and underneath your eye. So we want to keep this on the lid, and we also want to keep a lot of the pigment in the brush. So what I do is I take my lid brush, I take it and I press it into that powder, shake any excess off, and this is the one that I went right here. See, and it's a nice size because it covers the whole lid, and it's the one that I start going up into the crease with. So it's my mid-tone color, my light to mid-tone. And again, the same on the other size, but you can see why it's important to have this size brush as well as the firmness that comes with it. So this is sort of like building your shadow color on your eye. Just as a comparison, e.l.f. has one. So let me hold them side by side and you can see. So pretty close. The e.l.f. one's just a tiny bit smaller, but both very firm, and both would be used for the same purpose. The reason why I'm featuring e.l.f. and Gentry, those are the brushes I use the most, and last week's video was an e.l.f. tutorial where I used all e.l.f. products, including e.l.f. brushes. So I figure, why not explain how to use the brushes that I just purchased for that video, and if you bought them too, then hopefully this is a good explainer for you. Next up is the outer corner brush. This is really important with shape for a couple of reasons, because it's going to be using this color right here. So it's your next deepest tone, and we're starting to get darker and darker the farther out of the eye we go. So let me show you this brush for example up close, and she even labeled it corner. It's smaller, it's rounded, so it's perfect for that outer third of the eye. Again, very firm. You want that. We don't want shadow flying around everywhere. So the outer corner one, same concept. Tap it in. And this is the shadow that's now going to be built here, right? To start to give us some depth. I always think of my outer V happening in stages. It's like the medium color, and then we'll finish it up with the darker one. But again, what you're doing is you're kind of stipping and you're pushing it in. And that's why it's important to have really firm bristles that don't bend too much, because you're pushing. And then there's a blending brush that'll come later. Okay, you have a couple of options when it comes to now the darkest color. So the darkest color in this case is a super deep purple, right? So I use this in two ways. The first way that I use it is almost like a shadow eyeliner. So I would take a really small angled brush, and I could use it that way. Or there are even very small flat brushes. This one is by e.l.f. So you can see just how small that is. It creates like a shadow liner effect with the darker color. And this one is by Gentry. The brush is just a little bit bigger than the other one. So you really have options in how you want to build in that depth on the outer corner of the eye. Let's say I take the small e.l.f. brush, I go into the darker color. I've got a couple of things I can do. First of all, I can build on my top lash line, and then I can start to wing it out just a little bit, just to create a little bit more depth and do a shadow line. You can always follow up with, you know, a liner, a top line, or if you like the liquid liner, you could even do a little wing. But I like to have the color of the powder on there because it just plays with and matches the whole scheme. So that's what those little brushes are for, you know, for building in that darker color and really, really hugging tight to that lash line. That little angled brush, by the way, is so cool because this can also be used as a brow highlight. So don't forget, let me make sure, I think the last time I used it had black, so that would not be pretty. So yeah, like your super light shade, you can take that and go in with your angled one and hugs really, really tight to the eyebrow to give some nice separation between all the colors and the eyebrow and really make your eyebrows pop. So that little angled brush can be used for dark, can be used for light. If you have an extra, I would consider using one for each and just know which one you used where. That's all I ask. Finally is a blending brush. So this is what a blending brush looks like. It's going to be it's going to be bigger. It's going to be very, very soft, flimsy, because think of it as a whisker, right? So now if you have any hard lines, what we're doing is we're just kind of pulling it all together, right? We're softening it, we're smoothing it. Don't go too high because you don't want to get any of the dark colors up here onto the orbital bone, but you just want to make sure you don't have any lines of demarcation. So everything is just blended and smoothed out, and it has a nice soft look to it. So that's what a blending type brush would look like. If you like to do a smoky eye, something like this, the one that I showed you from Gentry, could work really, really well in smoking a shadow. So you could take that mid-tone if you like to do the inner rim and then smoke along the lower lash line. I don't have anything going on my lower lashes, but that would be about the size brush for kind of smoking things out underneath. You don't want it too wide, but not too skinny either, because if you use a super skinny brush for smoking, it's gonna make it look almost like eyeliner instead of smoke. So the whole idea of smoking is to give it a very, very soft, shadowy look. So a little bit bigger, but the outer corner one would be too big. So that would be my go-to for a smoky eye. Eye makeup is done, concealer, showed you which brush to use, which powder to set the concealer. So now we want to set the foundation. What kind of a foundation brush do we want? They come in all different shapes and sizes, but the key is, again, soft and bendable. You don't want to use, like for instance, this was that foundation brush. You wouldn't want to use this to set the powder because it's so firm that the minute you hit your face with it, you would have like a patch of powder that you'd be struggling to blend. So the reason why you want something so soft and bendable, whether it's, you know, arched like this or whether it's a big round one, is that it's going to hold on to the powder just at the ends very lightly and softly, and then it's going to spread it easily. So here's an example. I would take it, right, dip it in my powder, dip the excess in the lid, right? And now you're going to use the rest that's in the lid for your face. And then you just whisk. And this way, you're not getting too much powder on your face, which is another concern that women over 50 have, is that, am I going to get too dry and too cakey looking? And applying powder with a brush ensures that that won't happen. If you want a super matte, if you get really, really greasy, that's where those puff pads come in, because why? They take on so much more powder than a brush does. So when you take that much powder and you push it on, you see what happens. You're really essentially pressing it in, kind of like how we pressed in foundation with the sponge. Well, when you use a puff pad, you're pressing in powder with a puff. So just think about the amount of concentration that you're looking for, and it will help you find the best tool to apply your product. You know, it's every artist, it's not just paint that makes beautiful artwork, but it's the brushes and knowing how to use them. Contour and highlight. Okay, so my favorite contour and highlight kit is by Kat Von D. Here's what that looks like. And here are some options for you. I do love this one by e.l.f. It says small stipple. That's what it looks like. Perfect size for a contour brush. Not too big. That's the key. You don't want your contour brush too big, or else you're getting it too wide and in places where you don't need contour. So contour obviously would go here, just the right size, down on the jaw, tip of the nose, down the sides, right? All the places that you contour. But again, you don't want a super firm brush. You want something that's got some bendability, because you don't want to look like you've got tiger stripes. So this gives you a softer application, a buildable application. So make sure that your contour brushes are that way. Same thing also for a blush brush, and I use this one by Gentry, just the right size, soft, not too big, not too small. So I went with kind of a pinky mauve, tap, shake, then you see how it bends on the skin? So that shows you the level of firmness. Not too firm, because if it was too firm, again, I'd have a stripe of blush on my cheek. So it's nice. You know, that way you start with a light application, you can always build. Highlight brush. I think there are important things to look for in one. This one's by Gentry. I like it because of the size and shape of it. This one's a little bit more firm, but it's also narrow, and I'm hoping you can see that. That's important because we highlight down the center of our nose and our cheekbones. So for highlighter, right, you want something thin enough to run down the nose. That's not too wide because you've contoured to a certain point, and just about the right size to hit right here on the cheekbone and the chin. You can even run highlighter a little bit above the eyebrows too to make them pop, because we also did highlight underneath the brow, so it's just, you know, letting those brows come to life. But this one you want firm, concentrated, because you're really designating a smaller space. You can even highlight right here, right above your lip. And then when you have everything done, if you want a blending brush, this one is by e.l.f. And it's a good size, and it's just to make sure, again, that we don't have stripes, right? We want everything to be soft and uniform. Soft being the key, so you just take it and just blend. You know, make sure everything is smooth and seamless. In the end, that pretty much sums up brush. You could even, there are wonderful lipstick brushes, by the way. This color it's deep, but not too deep. If I go really dark, I like to use a lip brush. You can get those anywhere. I mean, any kind of lip brush. They're small. I prefer the retractable ones because you're going to pop them in your makeup bag, and of course you don't want them to ruin anything else that's in your makeup bag. So if you're looking for super precise definition on your lips, deep, bold reds and burgundies, then definitely go with a lip brush. I did not use one with this lipstick application. This is Dominique Be Bold, because I'm feeling bold today. Last little thing, I could do a whole video on this, but I just wanted to throw it in. Quick Clean Dry Clean Brush Cleaner by Sephora. Really great. You just spray it on a tissue, and you take your brush dry, and you just rub it a few times, and the powder will come out of it, the eyeshadow will come out of it, so it's a quick clean. It's like dry cleaning your brushes, like you dry clean your clothes. So if you don't want to do the full-on wash and let them dry overnight, I just wanted to throw out a dry clean brush spray that I've been loving, and it's a Sephora brand. But yeah, that's basically the brushes that I use and how I use them, where I use them, and why I use them, because the why is so important. Really changes how everything looks and wears, and will make your life so much easier. We all want to be an artist, and we just need the right tools in our toolkit to make it happen. Thank you, by the way, because this video came about because I was reading in the comment section so many about brushes. I don't know, how do I buy brushes? I don't know where to go. Where do I use them? How does it work? It's overwhelming. So thank you. I pay attention in the comments. I will look for further ideas from you, any guidance or direction. Mucho appreciated. Social media is where you find me during the week, every day. Monday, if you haven't heard, I've got my podcast, Over 50 and Flourishing. You can listen to that wherever podcasts can be found. We're also uploading the video portion of that right here on YouTube. So if you want another YouTube video to watch, that's Monday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. So deep breaths. It's a busy season, but it's a great, blessed season. So I thank you for that. Go out, be bold, and be blessed. Enjoy your brushes, and I will see you next week. Bye.